So we do have some new faces joining us today. And so, I want to say welcome to those of us who are joining us for the first time and hello to those who are joining us once again. Since this is the first meeting of the year, I just wanted to really quickly give just a very brief background into what this task force is all about. So this task force was made in response to a request by our local governments where there was concerns and just interest in trying to tie public health with air quality throughout our region, so that way we could determine where best to focus our efforts. And so in this task force, we have local government officials, health officials, academic representatives, and air quality experts. And since we are in the transportation department, we do specifically try and focus on air quality as it pertains to transportation. So again, welcome to everyone who's joining us for the first time. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our first presentation, and that's going to be Daniela Tower with NCTCOG.
Do I have to unmute myself?
No,
that should be good, right? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Also from here, welcome. And I would just like to give you a quick update on air quality monitoring that we are currently initiating in Hood County. And that is monitoring under the Rider 7 Local Air Quality Planning Grant. Next slide, please. Or can I do that?
No, I got it.
Okay, so the Rider 7 is a program distributed by the state, by the TCEQ, and it exists for ozone as well as PM 2.5. As you might know, the EPA has recently lowered the standard for PM 2.5, which brought 2 counties in our region, in the DFW region, to possibly non-attainment, and this initiated the PM 2.5 Rider 7 grant. For ozone, it exists longer, and we are much more experienced and further in the process, so this is why I want to focus on ozone today. This grant is only eligible for certain activities. So one is the monitoring of pollution levels and emission inventories, data analysis, and for modeling. This is a limited activity, which is only possible under Rider 7 PM 2.5. So for ozone, we are focusing on the monitoring of the pollution levels and the emission inventories. Next slide, please. So just to give you an overview of the current monitors that exist in North Central Texas. So on this map, we have gathered all monitors. The light blue colors are the regulatory monitors. And then there are several monitors that are operated by the cities. You can see these clusters in Denton County and Dallas County, which are initiatives from the respective cities. Next slide, please. So this is the regulatory monitoring network, mostly run by the TCEQ, which data is also reported to EPA to determine attainment or non-attainment. So the monitors we are focusing right now are the blue ones are the ozone monitors, the orange ones are PM 2.5, and the brown is the PM 10. So we have a number of ozone monitors distributed all or almost all over the area, but it's a large area to travel from one side to the other by car. If there is not a lot of traffic, still takes about 3 hours. So the number of monitors is still limited. So these pollutants can vary locally. And this is why we want to use Rider 7 funds to increase the density of monitors. Next slide, please. Oh, and just in general, since I would like to bring this presentation a little closer to the ground. This is one example of the TCEQ run monitoring stations, in this case in Fort Worth. Next slide, please.
Oops.
So for our monitoring planning for Hood County, so Rider 7 funds, and I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, can only be used in counties that are close to that are in attainment right now for the respective standard, but are close to become non-attainment. So for our region, that means that it's only Hood County and Hunt County. Hunt County is stable within the boundaries of the 2008 and 2015 standards. Hood County has since 2022 experienced an increasing value for ozone. So this is why we focused for this biennium on Hood County, and have set up a monitoring plan for monitors surrounding the regulatory monitor. What you see on the left side is a schematic planning sketch where the regulatory monitor is the black triangle in the middle, and the M1 to M5 monitors is the one we are going to install next week, actually. It's very exciting. And also to bring this closer to the ground, I've added 2 pictures of one monitoring site, the M5 monitoring site, which will be installed at the site of Vista Minerals near Tola. This is more or less an open field where we will mount an additional pole to the fence you see there, where we then install the monitors. Next slide, please. What are we going to install there? Rider 7 requires for us to use FEM, FRM, so federal equivalent method or federal reference method approved devices. And we have chosen the TubiTech ozone monitor. In addition, we will install a meteorological station, which will measure wind direction, wind speed, precipitation, and temperature. So, and in addition, at 4 of the sites, we are also installing low-cost monitor, which do not adhere to the FEM, which are not on the list, but in order to compare data, we are also monitoring precursors with this. Next slide, please. So the monitoring goals are to correlate meteorological conditions and the ozone readings, track the development of the ozone readings over the year and compare it to the different locations, and yeah, get a better spatial coverage on where pollution potentially is coming from. Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry.
So for the ones that have been in this meeting before, we have introduced a goal that we would like to create a one-stop shop monitoring network where also the public has access to data and results and interpreted results of our monitoring activities, to keep the public and all stakeholders involved informed about the monitoring activities, the monitoring results, and correlate those as well to health data development, which of course requires collaboration throughout the region. So, and as the NCTCOG, we are in a decent position to coordinate this collaboration, and would also like to contribute, but trying to bring all the efforts to improve air quality together in one page, and also relate that to health data. Next slide, please. So talking of health data, these are not always easy to come by. we are utilizing the EPA provided tools from the co-benefits risk assessment health impact screening and mapping tool, the COBRA, where also data can be downloaded, where this tool allows to make the impacts of air quality data visible, and also allows to see impacts of changes. So with increasing pollution or decreasing pollution, yeah, the impact can be mapped out. So this is a very useful tool that we are aware of and we are already using. Next slide, please. And then there is another tool, the Regional Environmental Health Data Visualization application, which is also an EPA provided tool, which compares health and environmental data set from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention and the EPA EJ Screen tool. But we have someone on the call who is a lot more familiar with this tool. And as soon as this presentation is over, I would like to give that over to Sala.
She can start.
She can start. Okay, then yes, please, Sala, go ahead. I'm sure you can say a lot more about this tool than I can.
Thank you so much, Daniela. So yes, my name is Sala Senkayi. I'm here with my coworker, Ronelle Brijmahan. I currently am the Quality Assurance Manager with the Office of Greenhouse Gas Reduction Funds at the EPA. So I'm based in headquarters, and that particular group is in the administrator's office. So just a little bit about REHD, so our Regional Environmental Health Data Visualization app and tool. The good thing about it is it adds consistency to the conversation. What it does is it pulls in all the data and information using what's called an API process, meaning we've linked to these other data sets that are on the screen. So not just CDCs and EPAs, but we've linked to things like wildfires, just a whole lot of other items out there. We also have water quality and blood levels, but we're interested here in air quality, and that's pretty amazing. So I'm currently working virtually in Dallas, and I actually used to work in Region 6, which is in Dallas, Texas. And so I've heard of a lot of the things that you all are talking about. This is new, but the benefit of REHD and using REHD visualization is we use one process to pull in all of these data sets. And just like EJ Screen and some of the CDC's tools, some of those tools, this is for screening and educational purposes, meaning you can quickly and easily get to the data, having data at your fingertips so that you can better understand and get a message out across to folks. So again, used for screening, and we'd love to continue having these conversations. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and take a screenshot of what it currently looks like. We are updating it. We formed a group, I believe last year or the year before. We started out with a small handful of folks, myself and another individual, under a President's Award from former President Barack Obama back in 2017. And since then, again, we've formed a bigger group that encompasses the entire region. We have environmental and health folks on the team to update the tool currently. And so when I talked to Analisa, I was like, what do you all want out of a tool like this? So it would be great for us to sort of continue having these conversations so that we can develop maybe a reporting mechanism for you as you go through and look at the data sets in this COG. So I've probably said a lot. I apologize, and I do talk really quickly. I wanted to, if Ronelle, if you're on the line, if you wanted to say hello really quickly, you can do that. But if folks have any questions or comments or thoughts, please feel free to reach out to me. My information is there. I can see it. And again, I will, in the chat, try to at least put some screenshots so folks can see what's in the tool currently. And I'm going to turn it back over to you all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sala, for introducing that. Really excited about the potential use of this tool for everyone. I did link there's a link to the tool. It'll take you directly to it. And then a link to the webinar that Sala gave a couple months ago where she first introduced it if you want any more information. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
And then I think we only have the contact
Yeah.
slide.
Yes.
So also to capture this in case you would like to reach out to us with further questions, ideas, desires for this tool, please do so. You have here on the slide all the information of our AQ technical team. And then thank you.
Yeah. All right. So we have a couple minutes. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Danielle about Writer 7 or Sala about the red tool?
I do have a question. My name is
All right.
Maggie. I'm a principal air quality planner at HGAC. I'm just wondering how you guys decided on that monitoring setup. So between the 2B Tech and the Met and the AeroQual, like, did you guys have to go through a procurement for that, or was there, yeah, what was the rationale for these selections?
Do you mean the instruments themselves
Yes.
or
Yep.
the monitoring setup? Okay, the instruments. So I mean, to a certain degree, it's we got quotes.
Okay.
And these FRM and FEM instruments have a fairly wide range of price tags. So we got several quotes, what would work, what meets our requirement, and the requirement was to go for this monitor, or to have a device that is on the FRM FEM list that EPA publishes and updates twice a year, I think. And as well, we are working with TTI on this, and TTI has a lot of experience with several monitoring devices. So in this one, with this company, not with this exact device, TTI has good experience. That is one thing, one reason. And the low cost monitors for us, I mean, we wanted to have a possibility to monitor precursors. And the FEM, FRM approved devices are very, very pricey. So we talked to the TCEQ that we would like to have an idea about precursors, but not, spend all of our funds into FEM. So the AeroQuals that we are using can only be used for reference. But it gives us an idea to evaluate the performance as well and compare the precursors to the ozone readings. As well, TTI and the city of Dallas, and I believe that Freddie is also on the call. So both entities have experience with these monitors, with the AeroQuals, and have seen that they perform very well.
Gotcha. And I guess a follow-up question to that is, what is the plan to put all this data like live on some type of dashboard? Like, is this current, like, can you see all of these data sets anywhere, or is that not available yet?
So currently, the AeroQuals are out at a monitoring station in Dallas for calibration. Next week, we are going to deploy all the devices in the field at the stations. So, and of course, then the next step is to, make sure that everything works and monitor the data to make sure that all the devices are operating properly. And we are working on a plan to make this data available to the public, but it's going to take some time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anyone have any other questions? I'm gonna check the chat really quick. All right, I'm not seeing or hearing anything. So again, thank you, Daniela, and thank you, Sala, for presenting on Writer 7 and the REHD tool. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to Caleb Roberts from Downwinders. Caleb, did you want to go ahead and share your screen with everyone?
Yes, I can do that. Good morning, everyone. Give me 1 second while I set this up. Okay. Analisa, can you just confirm that you can see the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caleb Roberts. I'm the Executive Director of Downwinders at Risk. We are a local DFW environmental justice, clean air, better democracy nonprofit. A little bit of background about myself, just because I know we're a little different than a lot of the groups on today, organizations. I'm an urban planner by trade, AICP certified from UT Austin, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so nowhere close to DFW, but I like the warmth down here, so had to come down to Texas. But I want to give you a little background on Downwinders at Risk, the work that we do, some of the projects that we have moving forward, and really our overall goal to roll back zoning regulations that we believe have come from a racist beginning, and how we are going about that using some air quality monitoring tools. We also have Dr. Lary from UTD that will be talking later that will kind of echo some of these things. So there will be some points that I do not talk about as in depth, and that's because I expect that he will have something to add to that as well. So moving, this is just a little snapshot of our board. Some of the members are not pictured, but this is a good representation of our team. Sue Pope, our founder, who founded us 30 years ago. We've actually 31 years this year. So we've been in existence for quite some time. We began our work in Midlothian fighting cement plants. Our first project was about 13 years, where we fought to remove some of the cement plants from around an elementary school that's T.E. Baxter there. So our first fight took us quite a long time to win. Then we went on to focus on Frisco lead smelters. One thing about Downwinders is you may hear us a lot in Dallas, but we do have historically been a regional focused nonprofit. So the Frisco lead smelter is something that we worked on and won in less than a year. We also were really big into the Dallas drilling ordinance that stopped drilling in the city of Dallas. That was one of our major components in the 2000s. But really, we're an air quality organization. We're for cleaner air. Like I said, cleaner air, better democracy are two of our main sentiments. And we do that using our Shared Air DFW network, which is a compilation. This is an open source system. You can go online right now, sharedairdfw.com, and see that we, with the work of UTD, help from the city of Plano, Dallas College, Dallas County, have put together a system that where we have low cost monitors in hyperlocal areas in very specific neighborhoods across Dallas and moving into Fort Worth. That would be Joppy, West Dallas, over by Highland Hills, and which is Paul Quinn College over there. This open source system will also allow you to see the EPA monitors, purple air monitors that we have registered. And these people can see wind direction on here, a bunch of other things that I know Dr. Lary will talk about. But this is real-time data that people can go on online, and you can do that right now on your computers if you would like to see it. I'm gonna not bore you all with where does PM come from. I think this is a safe bet that most of you all know some of the starts of that. But the real important part is why is pollution in certain communities, and that's where we get into a lot of our work and why we try to change zoning through local government, because we believe it is a concentration of a lot of polluters, sources of pollution in Black and Brown communities, and we see that in the health effects in the data. And this is where we place our monitors in order to kind of determine what health risks are going on in what community. So as you can see here, one of the biggest factors in why we do the work that we do is you can see the mortality rate of the Black community compared to other communities is multiple times, almost 4 to 5 times higher than some of the other communities when it comes to mortality. And that's a major concern for us. It happens all throughout DFW. And this is why we're so focused in the kind of work that we do, because this does change people's life. This does affect families. This does cut people's lives short. And we're trying our best to figure out ways to tell that story, to scientifically prove what is going on in these communities to make relevant change. So this is just an example of one of the kids that we go out in the communities, and you see these kind of things, the picture taken, I believe, in Joppy. And so just to give you an example of the real life effects that people have to deal with when we're talking about asthma, when we're talking about respiratory issues and things like that. So what do we do with this data? So this is just an example of 2 health questions. Like I said, we do work with UTD for the Shared Area DFW network, but we take that data and work with groups like Texas A&M to do health studies about, okay, what can be the ramifications of persistent health issues. So in this case, in Joppy, and we've done this in West Dallas as well, we've asked 2 questions as a research project. What is Joppy's actual exposure to PM 2.5 air pollution? And are these health problems among Joppy residents linked to PM 2.5 air pollution? That's how we try to structure some of the research projects on the end of those. And these are cut and paste from our presentations to the community. So you'll see we do it in both English and Spanish to be inclusive of the multi-ethnic communities that we have. So you'll see like community perceptions of what happens. They will respond like 62% of air quality in Joppy is poor or very poor. That is a determination made by residents about what they feel. 83% believe that air pollution in Joppy makes them sick. On this specific project, we got 50%, actually 51% of the households in that neighborhood to respond to our survey. So that's a great deal of involvement and engagement from the community. So I think this is very representative of what they feel about their community. So what we were able to find in Joppy, and I'm only taking Joppy, I could talk about Joppy and West Dallas, but just want to give you a sense of what happened is we were finding that the PM burden for Joppy was about 2 to 3 times higher than the Dallas County concentration average. So we compared these to, EPA monitors and was able to see the difference in the kind of results pollution-wise that were affecting Joppy residents as compared to other places. And these are the kind of data points that I just want to say, we don't think these are just stop points. I don't think any of the data that we produce is just, oh, this is all that we need. I think these are opportunities for us to do more research to try to find out what is actually going on, what factors are coming into the community. We know about our fight against industrial polluters, but we want to keep the science moving and keep refining what's happening to people. So I don't want anyone to think that these are stop points. These are actually agreements to move forward and do more research and to talk to the community more about what's happening with them. So you can see these are some of the results that we got comparing the TCQ monitors to the low-cost sensors we have in Joppy. One of the main points that we found was that 24 times that the Joppy air pollution violated EPA daily standards. So what does this lead us to really talk about? I think like I said, our main mission is to roll back racist zoning. And all of these processes, all of this scientific research is an input into making local policy change. So the science is an inroad to making local policy change. And where does this come from? We talk a lot about redlining, how cities were created. One thing that, as an urban planner, I talk about with redlining is we know the racial components of this, about where people were allowed to live. And if you don't know, the red and yellow were places that Black and brown people were allowed to live, or given loans to live is a better way to say it. But also for the industrial side, industrial facilities were given loans to build their facilities. They weren't allowed to build in the blue and green places because those were residential. They were allowed to build in yellow and red. So these are connecting both race and where industrial polluters are. And as an urban planner, I know that zoning was created to separate these uses. Its primary function is to separate industrial and residential uses. And these type of historical points just let you know how those two get melded together in a way that has now become somewhat inseparable in modern day policy. And it takes real solutions and real policy to change these things around. So what do? We have a project called the Neighborhood Self-Defense Project, which we go into communities. We analyze what's going on using things like our air monitoring system to tell a story about what air quality is and what pollution is happening in the communities, why it's happening, and then work on a plan about how we change that neighborhood back to something that the residents feel is positive for themselves. So I'll go through just a couple of communities. Flora Farms, as you know, Dr. Marshall Jackson and Shingle Mountain is one of the major ones that we started off with. And this was just a huge issue, a national issue, in which these shingles were placed in the back of, excuse me, shingles were placed in the back of Miss Jackson's home, causing major health problems. She still has health problems to this day. And we were actually in the process with the city of Dallas of working to rezone that. That authorized hearing should be coming up in the next month or so. Again, in West Dallas, GAF, this has been a major fight of ours with Janie Cisneros and Singleton United to talk about the air quality issues coming from not only GAF, but other industrial polluters in that area. And then to talk about zoning changes and ways that we can affect change upon that community, who also has a long history of public health issues. As you may remember, in the 80s, they had the lead smelter closed. There's a Superfund site there. So there's a lot of people who have documented history of childhood lead poisoning, which is just everything that health-wise that happens after you get lead poisoning is just an additive to ongoing health issues. And then in Joppy, TAMCO and deindustrialization of Joppy, which is a freedmen's town. And that's important because about how people came to that area looking for safety and security. And now they have the UP rail yard there, the switch yard, and a bunch of industrial facilities that if you ever been to Joppy, it's kind of an island on its own, kind of cut off on Highway 310 there from the rest of the community. So what do? We do a visioning project that helps people not only talk about what pollution and what's there today, but what they want to see, kind of reversing the problems of redlining and talking about a forward vision of what the community can look like. And we do that through neighborhood planning. This is an example of what Flora Farms was done in Flora Farms. HKS helped us with this to kind of vision what that community can look like. So it's not just for us to talk about what's wrong, but it's also for us to talk about what the future can look like. And that brings us to kind of our next phase. This is a little bittersweet, and I'll talk a little bit about it. We were pre-awarded a grant Downwinders at Risk and University of Texas at Dallas to expand our shared area DFW system through the EPA's EJCPS grant. But as you all probably can assume, that grant is held up through the federal government. So I'm talking about this and trying to say that it's going forward, but there's a lot of uncertainties there. So forgive me if I can't go too deep into some of the nuances. I'll try to say what we planned, but we have no idea what's going to happen. I'm just trying to stay hopeful that we can expand our system the way that we've intended to do. So what makes it special? I believe Shared Area DFW is a system that allows for hyper local monitoring of pollution. And I'll leave Dr. Lary to talk about why that's so important. But it is critical, and it gives real-time data so our communities can go online and see the pollution results and what's happening in their community second by second. It was created by UTD's MINTS team and used like groups like Texas A&M, the Complete Health Project. EJCPS will allow us to expand this network. It will be in the 3 communities that we began with that I talked to you about, Floral Farms, West Dallas, and Joppy, but we're also expanding into 6 other areas, into Fort Worth as well. So this is a major, in Arlington, this is a major thing for us to be able to expand this network and give resources to more communities. So I'm only giving a 6 month.
Thomas Chapman, the other one is Craig Nelson.
Thank you for muting. I'm only going to give you a 6-month timeline because, like I said, there is some uncertainty with the grant. But most of our original work, our work, and UTD has a part of this, is to connect our community partners and create a network around this system that allows for research planning, that allows for deciding where we're going to place these monitors in these communities, and really make this a community-based effort. You can see some of the team here. As you know, you'll see Dr. Lary in a second, but just from the folks from Texas A&M who have been so helpful for us in making this work. But our growth strategy is we use our monitoring system as an inroad into a lot of these conversations to have a scientific conversation, to give residents something about what's happening in their community. But that's all in pale in comparison into actually making substantive policy change and reversing the effects of racist zoning at the end of things. So it is an inroad for us to do more work. But we would like to lead with science because it is giving residents an actual result of what's happening, a validation of their lived experience, and that's what we're looking to do. So that's it for me on terms of the presentation. I will definitely be open to questions. I saw the chat lighting up, so I don't know, Analisa, if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Caleb? Checking the chat.
Oh, I do, Caleb. Hey, how's it going? Freddy Ortiz with the City of Dallas. So I was just kind of curious on the air monitors in Joppy. Are they still installed?
Are they? I didn't hear that last
Oh,
part.
are they
Sorry.
still installed in Joppy? The ones that
Yeah, yes, they're still
Okay.
installed. They're still installed. Part of this grant was to recalibrate and redo a lot of the monitors out there, but there are ones that we have recently put up, so they are still installed.
Okay, cool. And they're at just so I can see where they're at. So like at Yancey Street, you say, was it, or
Well, there's one on Carbondale.
Carbondale? Okay.
Yeah, I have to pull up the map of the other ones that we've recently put down, but yeah, it was actually very recently that we put some up, maybe a couple of months ago.
Okay.
So I'll have to get you the exact street location on that, on those.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we've got one at installed at South Central Park
Mm-hmm.
and one at Joppy Mama's. So hey, happy to collaborate in the future, if you want to see some
Sure.
our data and stuff that we're happy to share.
I would love that. you know, maybe that's a conversation. I can send you an email or something like it. We can connect offline.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions for Caleb? All right, not hearing any, not seeing any either. So, Caleb, thank you so much for presenting on that. That was really informative. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank y'all.
And we'll pass it on to Dr. Lary.
Thank you. So let me try and share my screen. Yes, this. Can you see my screen? Okay,
Give it 1 second. There we go.
Great. Thank you. So before I go into the talk, I heard a few times people saying, is the data live? And I think it was Maggie from Houston asking about that and where they are. So these two windows you see on the left and the right, they are actually live streaming right now. And so on the left, you see the EPA monitors, purple air monitors, our monitors, the wind speeds and directions, the rainfall. And on the right, you see zoomed in for a specific location where you have much more data, the full size distribution of particles from 0.1 micron to 10, the weather, wind speed and direction, rainfall, and you can see we've had a lot of that, obviously, and also live monitoring biodiversity with bird songs. So the pictures you might be able to see, if it's not too small, in the bottom right are the top 3 birds singing at that location at the moment. Okay, so let me try and get into the presentation. So while I was listening to the earlier talks, I really appreciated that, by the way. I reorganized my slides to try and address maybe more closely what you were wanting. So I think before getting into the details, it's helpful to have a big picture overview that we really are doing a variety of sensing at a variety of scales with a very simple focus, basically to serve society, because human health, as was already mentioned, is so impacted by our context. And one of the takeaways that I have gained over the last 15 years, which wasn't at all obvious to me when I came into this, is just how hyper-local things are. So that's going to be one of the points I bring out. And so part of that, we were quantifying based on data, what spatial scales do we need to be measuring across neighborhoods and at what temporal scales. So I'll just go ahead and lead with that, that is actually about 0.5 kilometer is the spatial scale we need to characterize neighborhood scale air quality. And that's based on millions of observations we've made over a large period. And the temporal time scale is really at least every minute, but preferably less. So that's why our sensors stream every second. And another part of this is we're all familiar with the unenviable canary down a coal mine. So a big part of what we've been doing, actually funded by the Army, has been humans as sensors. And so we found we've been able to infer very accurately inhaled concentrations of particulates, the particulate size distribution, ozone concentrations, CO2 and NO and NO2 from just our body's response. And as was mentioned in some of the earlier talks, these very nice regulatory grade suites like we saw from the TCEQ's trailer earlier, they give us great observations, and that also comes at a cost. So really, this is a multi-pronged approach where we're also using the lower cost sensors, the wearable sensors, but also remote sensing. So that's something we've been doing for a very long time. I worked at NASA for 10 years, and actually something I think we've pioneered. as well as neighborhood scale monitoring from electric vehicles that we do on a daily basis. And we hope, in partnership with community partners such as Caleb, who you already just saw, and maybe the Dallas Cycling Club, which is across DFW, to have bike-based sensors. So this I already showed. Yes, I already got this. Okay, so I was asked specifically to mention a little about the remote sensing aspects. And so this is the first of the slides on that, but it really does help to motivate why remote sensing. So I spent several years of my life, and it's amazing how time flies, bringing together globally as much data from regulatory grade monitors as I could across the planet. So the background colors on this map actually show the topography and the bathymetry, I guess, over the ocean. But what I wanted you to focus on is each of the little red squares, which are very small, and they're outlined in black, is a site where there are regulatory grade monitors of the type you see in the picture in the bottom right, these FEM type instruments. And so when I created this plot, these were sensors spread across 55 countries on more than 8,000 measurement sites that were streaming hourly. Now, what is the simple, obvious thing that stands out at us is even for countries like the United States, obviously where we're all living right now, there are quite large areas with no sensors, even across DFW. So we saw at the very beginning for the counties that are in the North Texas COG, there are some counties maybe with no sensors or just one sensor, and that's the key part of what your project is. So given that the spatial scale based on millions of objective observations we've made that we need to be measuring air quality is every half a kilometer or thereabouts. It depends on the synoptic context and which sources we're downwind of. And the temporal timescale is every minute. There's, let's just put it conservatively, a lot of gaps. And on a planetary scale, that's a lot of continental gaps. Like if you look at Africa, for example, really the only key measurements are in South Africa and in some islands off of the coasts. But DFW is no different from there. So what the purpose of this project was, which came out of my work for my PhD, I was given the task by my PhD supervisor in 1987 to create the world's first three-dimensional global model of ozone depletion, because the guy that had discovered the ozone hole was just in the next building, worked with the British Antarctic Survey. So after creating this model, I wanted to know how good it was, and I developed a voracious appetite to compare to every single observation I could: satellite, aircraft, ground-based, etc., etc. And to my dismay, they were substantially biased. So quite by chance, nearly over 30 years ago, I came across machine learning, and long before it was cool, and I found I was able to cross-calibrate any pair of instruments. So the idea was, what if we can take these observations from in situ sites that have these EPA-type reference grade observations and put them in the context of ubiquitously available data from space, meteorological analyses, topography, population density, and actually in our latest iteration, about 100 different parameters that we have available continuously for the planet, and certainly across DFW. And then use machine learning to map what we have ubiquitously available. For example, some of the most recent things that we've done for a PhD student who just graduated actually with the best thesis award was for using a geostationary satellite, giving updates every 5 minutes across the contiguous United States. And so what we found, we can take that type of observation use machine learning together with the synoptic situation and a whole set of contextual variables to give us very useful real-time observations. So they come from various satellites, as you can see here. And so the purpose of this table, it might be hard to read on your screen, but this was one of our first incarnations done about 15 years ago, where we attempted to do this. We brought together, or I brought actually, I was a lone ranger on this, 40 terabytes of data from the environmental context, from satellites, meteorology, population density, and so on, and used it to estimate in situ observations measured by FEM reference grade sensors. And we found we could do a really good job. So this was the result. Going from large gaps, now I had a continuous map for the entire planet. And it had remarkable fidelity of the features that show up here. Now, if I won't delve into all of them, although it's actually really rather interesting, just because we're out of time. So the one thing I want you to take away from this is using the in situ FEM observations we do have and putting them in the context of the ubiquitously available data we also have from remote sensing, meteorology, context, including things like topography and population, and about 100 different parameters. We're able to do really quite a good job of estimating airborne particulates at a scale that if we were to place in every grid cell, so in this case, it's a 10 by 10 kilometer grid cell. So obviously hundreds across each county, it would be exorbitantly expensive to have that number of FEM instruments, although really nice, but it's probably always going to be beyond us. So why don't we use them together as a jigsaw puzzle? All those different suites of things that I mentioned from the first slide. And just to give you a context, to do this task, it was a 40 terabyte training data set. So with a regular download speed, say about 10 megabits per second, maybe it's a bit faster these days, that would take 185 days just to download it. So when you zoom into some of these, you actually see we can do a remarkably good job. So the background colors are our PM 2.5 estimates using machine learning from satellite, meteorological context, you know, this is about 100 parameters. And the overlaid color-filled circles using the same color scale are the estimates, the in situ, measurements from FEM reference grade instruments. So you see, in the bulk of cases, there's actually a really good agreement. So for one of the students that just graduated, he was using GOES-R geostationary satellite data in this mix, and in fact, our own sensors to be part of the calibration. And he did it at an hour resolution for the entire year of 2022. And what these two panels going from left to right show us here is on a country scale, and then across Texas, and then across Dallas County as an example, is the fraction of the time that the PM level was above the EPA standard. So the top panel is if we have 12 micrograms. And so we see, if you look across Texas, there are significantly large areas which more than 40% of the time are in exceedance. But now when we come down to 9 micrograms, we can see that there are substantial areas above 60%. And if you just zoom in on one county on the bottom far right, Dallas County, we actually see that there's even higher levels. So this is just giving us maybe more spatially filled in values than the really nice FEM instruments we saw right at the beginning, with one exemplar often for each county at a scale of 10 by 10 kilometers. So really the point we're making here is the human exposome, our exposures over our lifetime, together with our social context, really have a big impact on human health. So much as some of the tools that were also mentioned earlier, we're bringing together the physical environmental part and the social environmental part. And I guess with COVID, it came home to all of us how these airborne particulates can have a role. And the purpose of this diagram is I want to bring home to us all, because I personally think it's very important. I think we should be going, even though it's a struggle for us just to get the PM 2.5 and ozone, as we had mentioned, but actually the health impacts of the ultrafine particulates, which are normally never mentioned, but actually during COVID, we realized just how important they were, are even more significant. So every one of our monitoring sites, we measure even the 0.1 micron particles every second. And so for 2.5 micron size particles, on average per cubic meter, there's about 1,000 of them. But at the 0.1 micron scale, there's 1 million of them. So they may be smaller mass, but there's a lot more of them. And they're like Trojan horses that introduced into our body. They get deep into our lungs, across the barrier into the bloodstream, and even into the brain, where they cause inflammation. And so, as we all know, there's many health outcomes associated with this, not least of which is life expectancy itself, but in pretty much every health area. So that also includes, by the way, for cognitive performance, which we're doing a whole set of other things also with special forces on that. So the takeaway I wanted you to get is that I really think we should go beyond just measuring certain size fractions to also having the size distribution, because the human health impacts really associated with those. So this is an example of this. It's a map of life expectancy for 2019 on a county basis across the country. And so if I choose a color scale capped to 82 years, it kind of is a bit easier to read. So if we zoom in on, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. If we zoom in on Texas, and then on the COG region, we see there's a big disparity from county to county, even of a summary public health measure, such as life expectancy. But as an aside, we also have every single emergency room admission for 20 years for the entire state of Texas, which we're also doing a similar analysis of. So what this graph is on the x-axis, the actual life expectancy, and on the y-axis, the estimated life expectancy from the context. And this context involves more than 1,000 variables, pretty much comprehensive data from the US Census, but also more than 50 parameters from the meteorology and the atmospheric composition. And this is over an entire year for 2019. And the simple takeaway I wanted you to note from this is in the top variables are airborne particulates. And we can do, in explaining this, we can do the same thing for emergency room admissions. Here it's for acute asthma, which has its own ICD code. And also for sepsis, which actually is one of the most, is about the top ER admission thing for the entire state of Texas. So all of these parameters, you can do a remarkable job of explaining as a function of the social and environmental context. So to complement the other tools we heard, our dream is, and we've really been working very hard on, is having a comprehensive social and environmental observatory. And that also includes the very hyperlocal context of turning the human into a sensor. So the way we would do that, and these are pictures from our army project, we had in our electric car a whole set of reference grade instruments. And then the cyclist, which in this case happened to be me, I was the first guinea pig for this. We have a biometric suite measuring more than 300 parameters, 500 times a second. So the body's autonomic response. And to our delight, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion. We actually found that from our body's response, we can very accurately estimate the inhaled concentrations. And so you see some of the setup here. Now, on the right-hand side, you see the mile-long cycle track in Breckenridge Park in Richardson. And the colors around that track are actually the changing PM concentration, which vary just around that 1 mile loop by more than an order of magnitude. So a second thing I really hope you will take from this short presentation is the hyperlocal nature of air quality variations. So we use the multivariate machine learning to turn the biometric observations made from the suit into actual PM abundances for the various size fractions and a size distribution, inhaled concentrations of gases, and so on. So I'll just show you one of these for PM1. So in the graph along the bottom, you see those different colored panels. The black line is the measured PM1 in micrograms per cubic meter from a reference grade instrument. And the dashed red line is the inferred solely from the body's response. So they tracked very well indeed. And then we increased our sample size with many more cyclists and we could do the same. So the goal of really this different sensing we've been describing is to complement, we're not interested in replacing, but complement the FEM type instruments so that we can have more observations at a more local scale. Because the air quality is actually varying on a very hyperlocal scale. And the size distribution is normally ignored, but is also useful. So this was from one of our very first sites back in 2016, which happened to be in Chattanooga in Tennessee. And horizontally, we have time, and vertically, we have particle size, and the colors correspond to how many. So the bit I've highlighted with the orange there is actually an airborne mold size fraction. So a community group recently asked us to make some measurements in South Dallas in an apartment complex that had severe mold. And actually, in that case, the indoor concentration was much higher of PM than outdoors, and that was coming from molds. So the simple point I'm trying to make is we don't just measure the PM 2.5 amount, but we also do the whole size distribution from 0.1 microns and up. And so this is an example of that size distribution over a day that we have live. And the very first dashboard I showed you on the right, that has that. So the way we do this is we calibrate our low-cost sensors against reference grade sensors with machine learning. And this is some examples for various size fractions from papers where we documented this. And also we worked with Fort Worth and deployed it next to their FEM instruments. So the top left graph shows a time series. The black line was the TCEQ BAM, and the overlaid green line was our data from the lower cost monitor. And the bottom left scatter diagram is one plotted against the other. So they actually were really tracking rather well. Now, in doing this machine learning calibration, the local temperature and humidity and pressure are tremendously important. So one of the theses of a student that just graduated was actually exploring the whole humidity aspect of this. So a recent upgrade we've been working very hard on, even though the sensors have a sort of calibration from the vendors, the low-cost monitors, we then have our own, where we have our own chamber where we can adjust the humidity, very important, and the temperature, and collect hundreds of thousands of contemporary observations for the low-cost sensors and the reference ones. But then we're also going to deploy them on our electric vehicle and do the same, but actually like in the wild across DFW. So the simple point I hope you can take from this is that we really take the calibration seriously. Now, when we went across one of our satellite pixels from the analysis I showed you earlier, so another student that graduated a while back now, he drove across a 10 by 10 kilometer pixel in North Texas every day for several months. So he drove across this 100 square kilometer square, which correspond to the size of a satellite pixel, measuring every second as he drove, which corresponded to a spatial resolution given the speed limits of less than a meter. And what was ubiquitously obvious is the hyperlocal variability. Now, when 4 students with our wearable sensors did the same across campus, the UTD campus in Richardson, the resulting map was seen. And again, you see this hyperlocal variability. So the colors are in micrograms per cubic meter. The cyan at 9 micrograms is the EPA standard, and we've capped to this color scale at 25, just so we can see the bulk of the variability. And the horizontal red line that you see in the middle top left, that's where cars were stopping as they were leaving campus. And there is well in excess of 25 micrograms, but just around the corner, it was much less. And the rectangle called out in the middle top right is when they walked by somebody vaping. And there it jumped up to 680 micrograms. So the simple thing I hope you will take from this is there really is hyperlocal variability, both spatially and temporally. And if we're going to seriously look at the health impacts, we need to be taking that into consideration. So we're even doing this across rooms. So the building I'm at the moment, the Richardson IQ, which is a partnership with the city and the university, is censored across the building. So that map you see in the bottom right is, there's about 30 sensors across the building also streaming live. And so we see the same indoors and obviously outdoors. But then when it rains, this distribution is severely affected because the atmosphere is washed. So what you see on the left and the right here are 2 of the students' drives across this 100 square kilometers. And in between, there was a heavy rain, and you can see a big impact on obviously the atmospheric conditions. And so we also have instrumented electric cars, which are measuring every day. So these are from some of those drives. On the left, it's for CO2. On the right, it's PM 2.5, although we're measuring all size fractions. And you can again see some areas of this red and some green, and they're right next to each other with this hyperlocal variability. So we're in the process of developing a bike bottle version of our sensors for partnering with the cyclists. I see I'm running out of time. So I'm going to give the slides, but let me, yes. Yeah, oh, I'm actually nearly done. So what I also wanted to mention is I think we also have opportunity here that if we have at a much finer scale the real-time monitoring, if there were unexpected events such as a bioterrorist act, or we had like a hotel explode in Fort Worth last year, and those incidences are becoming more frequent, we can actually have a plus for public safety beyond the pollution, which I appreciate is a different funding source. But we're partnering with the Naval Research Laboratory to include our live streams in their tools. And what that gives us the ability to do is highlight where the sources of the pollution are. So I would, if any of you are interested in the COG, I'd love to work with you on that. And at that, I should probably hand it back to you before I take too much time. So these are just the various sentinels and modes that we use for measuring the environmental composition. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lary. That was very informative. We do have a few questions in the chat. And just a reminder that we have about 15 minutes left in the meeting. So we'll try and get through all these in a timely fashion. But the first one is from Chris. He asked a few questions in the chat, and I'll read the three of them to you. Was to the 2022 ML data compared to 2022 ground level FEM monitors? The second question is, can ML data determine upstream sources? And can historical ML data be used to predict pollution levels estimated to see in the future?
Okay, so there's a few things there. So let's take the first one. So this here, these were co-located sensors that were next to each other. So their separation was less than a meter. They were just in different parts of this cage. And so it's very important, obviously, to have that co-location. So the purpose of the machine learning is because every sensor is a little different, and obviously they're not reference grade sensors. So to have the personalized calibration of each low cost monitor, we measure in real time the size distribution of the aerosols with these lower cost monitors, but we also measure the pressure, temperature, and humidity, and we use that to do the calibration. So the result is your lower cost monitor gives you much more useful results that holds up very well to comparison with the reference grade BAM. And our recent, we were able to acquire a BAM which actually will measure PM1, PM2.5, PM10, as well as 2 reference grade monitors for the full size distribution from 10 nanometers to 100 microns. So we basically do the calibration for the PM levels, but also for the size distribution. Now, the second question was about inferring where the sources are. So there's a couple of ways we're involved in doing that. One is if the observations that we make, which is done every second, if we then couple that with back trajectories, if we just do one back trajectory, there's a large amount of uncertainty associated with it. But if we're now doing it every day for the year at a second by second basis, it then becomes progressively more robust, although there are still uncertainties, but it actually becomes pretty good. But even better level is the Naval Research Laboratory model. So what they have there is they ingest the actual LiDAR topography of a scene at least 1 meter resolution. So they have the exact outline of all the buildings, the urban canyons, and so on. And then they do detailed fluid dynamical calculations. I remember when I first saw this, it was in Cambridge in England about 25, 30 years ago. And you could see vortices breaking off of the branches of trees. It was like insane. So they do these detailed calculations over all wind directions and then create what they call a nomograph, which is like a very smart lookup table. And so for the current wind speed and direction at a location, you can take the data from one or more live sensors, whether they're from a vehicle or vehicles driving across the scene, whether they're from static locations, whether they're from drones. And you can use that to then infer where the sources are. So that's something we're actively working on with them. And so you get things like this. So from a relatively small number of observation sites, you are able to have, with an uncertainty, and of course there's always uncertainty, begin to address where these sources, source or multiple sources more like, are coming from. So as for the predictive level, there's obviously many ways of doing that. Typically, obviously, the regional or global air quality forecast models are used, but then also we have the issue of grid size and scale. So another thing we're doing, which came out of another thesis of a student that just graduated, who's probably the smartest guy I've ever met, he's definitely smarter than me, we're using this numerical approach called Havoc. And what we can do with that is take any time series and create a short-term forecast. So using that, we could actually run it on the edge, on the sensors themselves, where we're measuring second by second. And it looks like we can have a useful prediction of at least a few hours, and depends, we're still working on it. It may be longer in the future. So I think that's as close as I can get to answering your question. I don't know if I did or not.
Awesome. Yeah, Chris, did that answer all your questions?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna move on to the next questions from Daniela. Daniela had asked, does ozone show the same high spatial variability as particulate matter? She says, in my understanding, PM 2.5 has a higher variability, maybe also because of the involved photochemical reactions versus direct emissions.
Absolutely. So we actually calculate the spatial scale based on observations on a species by species, or actually even size fraction by size fraction basis. So the way we do that is to take thousands, if not millions, it's more like, of observations, which typically form either a spatial, cover a spatial domain or a temporal domain. And then we look at essentially the covariance as a function of their separation in time or space. And so here is an example of a spatial covariance. So that plot in the middle, the H is the distance of separation between any two observations. And the y-axis is a measure of the variance, the covariance. And you will typically see a curve where this covariance will level out after a certain spatial scale. So when we did this for particulates, like if we just take the PM 2.5 fraction, on the right-hand side, you see the results for 3 different synoptic situations. So for our analysis period for this study, it was about over 6 months in 2014, we found that there were 6 different synoptic regimes that we were seeing in North Texas, and each regime had a different spatial scale. And that spatial scale varied from about 3/4 of a kilometer to over 5 kilometers. Now, if you look at different size fractions, it'll actually be slightly different. But then if you look at ozone, it will also be different, because that happens on a larger spatial scale for a couple of reasons. One, for particulates, typically the sources are very localized, say the combustion source, maybe the vehicles, maybe a dust source. It could come from a building site, from an agricultural source. I mean, a dried up riverbed, depending on the time of year. It's varying in spatial scale and actually with time. But when you come to ozone, ozone is a result of obviously a sequence of reactions involving different species, each of which have a different spatial scale. But then on top of that, it's very temperature dependent and illumination dependent. So you end up, because of the relevant chemistry for ozone of having a larger spatial scale. So these spatial resolutions I was mentioning were specifically for PM 2.5, and for the various size fractions, they will vary, and for different gases or pollutants, they will be varying.
Awesome. Okay. And then next question is from Kevin. He asked, when you attach these sensors to a vehicle and collect data while moving, do you do anything to compensate for the bias of the movement? What stack testers call isokinetics?
Oh, yes. So we actually, we spend a lot of effort on that. So initially, when the first time we did it, and we got these graphs, we actually had an isokinetic inlet. And for those of you who maybe it sounds, what on earth is that? It's basically a nozzle which is carefully shaped so that the flow rate down a tube will stay as constant as possible with varying speed. So it did indeed use an isokinetic inlet, but we have found actually that if you place the sensor not directly in the airflow, so for example, for the electric vehicle that was measuring, where was the slide now? For these ones, we actually placed the sensor, it's electric, so there's no tailpipe emissions, next to the rear license plate, because we have power there. And so it's not directly, no air is being forced into it, but it can draw its sample as it needs. We end up, it seems to get pretty good results. And the way you test that is to see, are your measurements speed dependent? And we did not see a noticeable, discernible speed dependence. So we are very cognizant of that. And yes, that's a great question.
Awesome. Okay. And then one more question from Daniela. Does higher humidity make pollutants linger longer?
So when you have higher humidity, and this becomes an issue, especially when you get close to the dew point. So let me show you another. So when you get within a couple of degrees of the dew point, then most of these lower cost observations, they're optical particle counters. And so you're not discerning what the particles are, but even the FEM instruments, they will typically have heated inlets. And the reason for the heated inlets is to make sure that the air is not close to the dew point. So as you get close to the dew point, then on the airborne particulates, which act as cloud condensation nuclei, you start to get fog or clouds forming. So the particle counts, and hence the inferred mass, go way high because it's now counting many more drops, these fog droplets, which are growing. And so it seems to be a really high PM micrograms per cubic meter, but really they are not all like pollutant particulates. So we've found that by careful calibration, taking the actual temperature and the humidity and obviously the dew point into this whole non-linear machine learning, you can do a great correction. So an example of that is the black line on this plot, which you really can't see because it's covered up by the red dotted line. That's the black line is the EPA data with the inlet heater, like the reference grade instruments use. And this one was at Fort Worth in that cage I showed you. And the red dash line are our low cost instruments with the careful machine learning calibration. And you see they basically cover each other up. So the green line is if we don't correct for the humidity and the temperature effects. So the good news from that is we're able to do a good job of accounting for it, but the calibration is essential. That's why we went to the extent of getting this chamber so we can change the humidity from 5 to 85%, no, 5 to 95% over a very wide temperature range from like well below freezing up to 85 degrees. So we can then co-locate our cheap sensors with the reference grade sensors, span this parameter space to get our training data, but then also deploy the low-cost sensors and the reference grade sensors on the mobile electric vehicle to like do the similar thing in the wild. And so I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much. We're actually about out of time, but I thank you so much, Dr. Lary. That presentation was very informative. And thank you to everyone who asked questions. If anyone has any additional questions for Dr. Lary, you know, I'll share his contact information along with Caleb's and Daniela's if anyone had any other questions come up. And so with that, I'm just going to say thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions, concerns, any ideas of what you would like to see in future meetings, please reach out to me and let me know. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you all.